Morning, everyone. Welcome to this second edition of Babelica that started yesterday. And today we are the 21st of September, which is the International Day of Bibliodiversity. So I wish you a wonderful Bibliodiversity Day. We will start our exchanges today with the session, a roundtable on book ecology through a decolonial perspective, and I will soon leave the floor to Véronique Tadjo, who will be moderating this roundtable. Also, our thoughts are for Laetitia Saint-Louper, who was supposed to be the moderator of this session and has some last-minute personal problem. And I would also like to thank our partners for Babelica that have helped us a lot for this roundtable, the association AFD Campus. So, Véronique, the floor is yours. So, good morning, everyone. Thank you, Laurence. And today we are going to talk about books, indeed, and more specifically, book ecology. But here we want to talk about book ecology with a decolonial perspective. What do we mean by this? Well, we mean the perspective of readers and publishers from the Global South, a Global South that is to be understood in opposition to the Global North, of course, and the Western sphere in general. So we will ask different questions today. First, how does the publishing and the book world in the southern countries talk about ecology in general? Also, how does the domination of Western publishers at the global level have effects on those publishers that live in the global south? Also, we will probably talk about book publishing, creating books, and the value chain of books in the global south, the supply chain of books. So we've got three speakers today. We've got Zulfa Adiputri from Indonesia. She's the head of a publishing house that was created recently that is working specifically on children's or youth literature. So literature for children aged 1 to 7. And she will talk about her everyday work and the processes that she's carrying out today. Then we have Sandra Tamele from Mozambique. She will talk about publishing in her country. And in Mozambique, there is almost no public policy for book publishing or for the whole supply chain of books, for the promotion of books. Then we've got with us today Corinne Fleury from Mauritius, and she will be talking to us about where the current situation of books in her country, because many languages are visible in Mauritius. Also, I've got to say that her publishing house won the Pop Award from Bologna in 2023, so congratulations to her for that. So first I will ask the speakers to introduce themselves, to tell us what they are doing on the ground, what is their work, and what might be hindering their work. So let them maybe talk about what the work of a publisher is in their countries, and what is also their way of working as women in an industry that's very often dominated by males, because we are with three female speakers today. So Corinne Fleury first. Yes, good morning. First of all, thank you to the Alliance of Independent Publishers to allow us to speak on such an important topic that is ecology through a decolonial perspective. So I am Corinne Fleury, as you said. I'm the co-founder of the publishing house that's Franco-Mauritius Public House. And we started in Mauritius with our office, local offices, but we also work in France. So we are specialized in Indian Ocean literature. We work on children's book, which represent most of the books we publish. But since 2018, we also created a collection on more general literature, and the idea is to address some of these issues of imbalance between the North and the South. So these North-South imbalances are imbalances that I experience in my everyday work. And our publishing house is indeed working with the North and the South. And I think this is a way of working both ways. It's important for me because the topics will not be experienced the same way if you think with a relation from the north to the south, or if you think from the south to the north. The perspective will be quite different. So, in any case, in Mauritius, we talk about different topics. First, there is the topic of the island, which is very important for us. We're an African island, but it's an island that's, well, as the name explicitly says, is not attached to the continent. So we are a different entity, and sometimes it's quite hard for people to understand that we are African. Also, we are the only island with people from Indian ethnia. There's a lot of people from Indian descendants, and you see languages in Mauritius like Hindi and others, languages that can't be found on the African continent. And so there is also many problematics arising from the fact that we work on an island. It's hard to be connected physically to the African continent, to also be connected to other islands. And of course, we are 10,000 kilometers away from the global north, which does complicate things at times. So this is the general context. I also believe that we've got to address another issue. Veronique, you mentioned the fact of being a woman as a publisher, of being a female publisher. And I think that in Mauritius, this question is actually not so important. I know that this is a question that's very important in the global north, but from my point of view, it's not so much a problem for us. Yeah, maybe it changes your vision in a way, though. Yes, indeed, indeed. But what I mean to say is that as a female publisher, I don't have to really work harder to make my voice heard in Mauritius. That's not really a big issue for me in my everyday work. And what's more, we are two publishing houses working on children books, and it's also a woman that is really the spearhead of this other publishing house. I think that my publishing house, Nomad Publishing, is very important. And there's also the publishing house Vis-a-Vis that is very important in Mauritius. And personally, I don't feel the fact of being a woman as a hindrance in my work. But it's true that we face many trouble when we think about North-South relations.
Expliquer exactement Okay, I will now give the floor to Sandra so that she can tell us what she does and how she works in Mozambique.
Thank you, Veronique. First of all, I would like to thank you for this invitation. I'm really honored to be here with you, with Zulfa from Indonesia and Corinne from Mauritius. So I commend you for putting together this panel of 3 women. I think that this is the moment that we should be showcasing faces like ours in the publishing industry. So I am a publisher by accident. I have a degree in architecture, and then I switched careers into commercial interpreting. But I think that being a person that is very discontent with her circumstances, it was inevitable when I'm found in a position where I live a career where I'm unwanted and turn into a career that I am invisible because, as you know, we've been advocating for the mentioning of translators' names in the covers of books and of many reports and many written materials. So it was inevitable for me to do something about it. I started a competition that then turned into 3009, the first Mozambican publishing house that is dedicated to literature and translation. And this comes from the name itself. 3009 is inspired on September 30th, International Translation Day. That's around the corner. So we publish only translations. We started in 2018, so a few months 2018 when we established the company, but then the first collection came out 6 months before the pandemic hit. So it was quite a particular time for us to be newcomers in this field of books publishing and selling. That said, we at 3009 started by translating from French and English into Portuguese. That's our official language in Mozambique. But soon I realized that we have such a linguistic diversity. We have 41 spoken languages and 1 sign language in Mozambique. So it was inevitable for me to also start translating into the 3 main Mozambican languages. That's Makua for the northern region, Sena for the central, and Xangana for the south. They are intelligible with the regional languages. So this enabled us to have a broader impact with our catalog. We started very small by publishing only the short stories from this competition that we wanted young people to be interested in reading and then translating and pursuing a career in literary translation. But then it grew. I love poetry, so we started translating poetry too. We do novels, nonfiction. And 2 years ago, I ventured into publishing for children. And what a ride it has been. As you can see from 2018, the learning curve is very steep. Being a woman that has no background in publishing, so I'm learning by doing. And the reality in my contest is that we are almost 32 million of Mozambicans, and very few of us speak any of the 41 languages. We are very dispersed. We have Maputo, that's where I am, the capital, that is quite affluent. But then we have a lot of asymmetries. And that said, women are half of our population, but they are 80% of the 39% of illiterate people in our country. And our average age is 18 years old. That's why publishing for children and young people makes all the sense in my market. Linguistically, we are an island, not an island in terms of being detached from the continent like you, Corinne, but we are the only Portuguese-speaking country in the Indian Ocean, and also we are surrounded by English-speaking countries, and this makes circulation of knowledge and literature in general a challenge. But I see it as an opportunity, being a publisher that only does translation. So I think that we are doing slowly our part into making a difference. We don't have a book infrastructure per se. We used to have 5 big booksellers in the country, but the oldest and the largest one went bankrupt 2 years ago. So that was a huge backlash into the industry. But at the same time, we have seen a boom in indie publishers that are coming with catalogs that are very diverse, catalogs that are very strong and very good. And I think that we are going through a moment that presents lots of opportunities that we need to explore and see how best to make the most of it. Yes, we are in the global south, but I think that one of the best things about the pandemic was that we started to listen. I don't think that we would have an event like this before the pandemic. So I think that's one of the positive shifts that we are seeing right now. So there is communication between us, a micro publisher from Mozambique, and major publishers in Brazil, Portugal, because we speak the same language. Okay, we have different variants. But at the same time, we also communicate with big publishers. I have now a book by Chimamanda Adichie with HarperCollins. So there is some negotiation that's happening, not co-publishing per se, but it is happening. So I think that we are living a very positive moment in Mozambique. And I think that throughout the conversation, you'll know more about my sector, and feel free to ask any questions if you need to know more. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Sandra. It was very interesting to hear. I'm now going to turn to Zulfa, who's from Indonesia, and who's going to tell us about her experience, her own experience on the field in Indonesia. Zulfa?
Zulfa, ton micro est fermé.
Zulfa, your mic is off. You need to turn it on. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Veronique and Sandra and Courtney also. It's very interesting to hear from you. Can you hear me, everyone? Is that okay? Okay. So, okay, my name is Zulfa. I'm from Indonesia, and I am a mother of 2 and a children's book author, writer, who turned to establish an independent children's book publishing house very recently, just in January 2023. And I'm here on behalf of a collective called Aliansi Mekar Pukul 4. It is literally mean Bloom at 4 Alliance. So this alliance was established by 4 women, including me, my friends. The 3 other are the owner of also independent publishing house, and also an independent bookstore. And the other one, she is an essayist, and also she writes about women, family, gender issues, and also children's, especially children's literature. So when I'm starting in this new world of children's literature, I knew nothing, because I studied international political economy of agriculture and food, especially on sustainability governance. But it is interesting because what's happening in the food world, in the agriculture world, is rather similar with what is happening in the book world, at least in Indonesia. So the domination of the giants, yeah, the big companies, in the agriculture sector, the farmers are squeezed in both input and output sector, and that's also happening with the one that is in children's literature, children's book sector in Indonesia, because the market is very oligopolistic. I think the readers, they don't have many choices, because it is almost as if the big companies can sell whatever they think will sell, instead of thinking about what is actually important to discuss. This is true, I think, at least for children's literature, because so together with my friends, we have discussions, we have this collective uneasiness. We think that the problem of children's book in Indonesia are rooted from the paradigmatic issue on education and on how adults see children and what the children can do. So the children's agency, if I can say. So because children are seen as this, maybe if I can borrow what Paulo Freire said about education, yeah, the children are seen as those who received and don't have the ability to think freely. That is why I don't think that the current ecosystem of children's book industry in Indonesia is very healthy. So in recent years, at least a decade has been passed since the blooming of children's picture book in Indonesia. So picture book is something that is very new. We had comics in the past, but the format of picture book is entirely different thing for us. So in the past, so in Indonesia, we had 3 decades of dictatorship, if I can say, by Suharto, the New Order of Indonesia. And we are banned to talk about ethnics, about race, about religions. It sounds like a good thing, but in reality, you are not allowed to talk about your identity. So many younger generations, they lose roots of themselves, of their parents, their grandparents. So these picture book movements that just coming out recently, they try to fight this by publishing books that are more contextualized, that shows more about the day-to-day life in different parts of Indonesia. But of course, we face many kinds of problems, many kinds of issues, which also we can discuss later. So I think that is the prologue from me now. Yeah, thank you.
Oui, je voulais vous poser une question.
Thank you very much. Yes, I wanted to ask you a question on this. How do you find illustrators? Is it hard for you to find illustrators, be them men or women, for your books? Is it hard to find?
Oh, illustrators. I think illustrators are not that difficult to find, but I would rather tell about another thing, because illustrator is a party that is oppressed, I think, in Indonesia right now, because they don't get, they don't have voice for what they do, and they often cannot explore their art style because they have to follow the market. What is in trend? Of course, there is always change in trend, but sometimes you are limited, especially in children's book. You are often illustrators are often told to use certain styles or certain colors. And also they don't have, the government of Indonesia, they don't have standards for wage for illustrators. So illustrators can be paid very, very cheap. And many of them rather choose another jobs, or if they really want to stay, then they have to work really hard for that. Or maybe they just do commissions from overseas, from maybe Western countries, because it pays better. And that is the situation. Yeah.
Merci beaucoup.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Zulfa. I'm going to ask the same question to Corinne and Sandra. How do you find your illustrators, be them men or women, so that you can really showcase what's happening, so that you can really have children relate to the books?
Well, it's a really important question for our work, Veronica, and I think that through a decolonial perspective, it's important to mention this issue. And we've actually worked a lot on this with our publishing house, because it's almost at the heart of why we created our publishing house and why we wanted to work on a children's book, because we saw that there was a difference between what was given to read to children in Mauritius bookshops 15 or 20 years ago. So, of course, there was a difference between they were offered to read and the everyday life reality. The idea here was really about making it easy for those children to identify themselves, because identification is very important when you're a child. And when I was a child, I received many books that came from abroad, and I only had a world vision based from other perspectives. And so I asked myself questions later when I started to understand these ways of operating. I thought, if we're unable to see our environment, what is the reason for this? Is it because our environment is not interesting, or is it for another reason? Back in the days, I thought about these issues, and maybe I couldn't answer them from the point of view of cultural domination that comes from the north. Well, this was really the head start of our publishing house and of our way of thinking. And we really wanted to make sure that we were able to promote the culture of Mauritius and of the Indian Ocean more generally, in order for children to be proud of being part of this island, of being part of this thriving region of the world. We wanted to make sure that children saw that they lived here and that this was actually great, or it was at least as great as living in the north and as interesting. So in order to achieve this goal, we had to change the way of talking about culture, about publishing, but also we needed to work on illustrating the book, because we wanted the children to be able to have access to the books through visuals. We wanted the visuals to really show what the children were experiencing in their lives. So, for example, we created a book that's called Heaven in My Hair, and it's a typical example of this process. So, it's a woman from France and Romania that wrote the story, and she writes this story about a little girl who's got curly hair, and it's hard for her to wash her hair. And I wanted to work with a woman that is from Mauritius to draw the pictures for the story. And so this little girl, instead of getting lice on her hair in the story, she meets all kinds of other little creatures and insects. And so I asked this person to draw pictures for the story. And in the history, we only knew that the little girl had curly hair. She could be blonde, she could be ginger. We did not know. But since we were writing and drawing from the south, I told the illustrator, well, I think that she's a little girl from mixed origins and that she has curly hair. And so the drawer decided to draw her this way. So, of course, in Mauritius, this was important to have this way of representing little girls because many little girls in Mauritius liked the drawings. And in France, we also received a very particular welcome. And in book fairs, many people living in France came to us and said, "Thank you for this book. We're really glad to finally have a character that's of mixed race." Because really, you can open 100 of books in France and you will not see a lot of mixed race people, to be honest. You will see black people, you will see white people, but not mixed race people. It's something you do not find a lot in French books. Personally, it has to do with my personal story because my husband is a white man. And I think that this visual issue is really important because how can you build yourself? How can you grow when you're not able to be represented in pictures, in histories, where you feel like you're not represented in anything, and it's hard. And so I think that this has to do with this decolonial perspective. It is fundamental to understand that today there is a world domination that is visible in the publishing world. When you look at data, you can see this very clearly. In 2018, the World Property Organization carried out a study on 14 countries and on the publishers in these 14 countries, and you see that half of the benefits in the publishing industry comes from the United States. Then you find Germany, France, England, and these four countries represent the biggest international groups. So you see straight on that southern countries are not visible, not represented. And so this is a big problem for diversity. Diversity in terms of language or visual diversity also. So this decolonial perspective is really hard to achieve. And I think that this question of illustrating the children's stories is very important today. It's particularly relevant. And we want to promote it. And this is about eco-thinking also, eco-making, because we've got to think about ecology and diversity as publishers. And these illustrators, where do you find them? Are these people who are maybe painters, drawers, or what's their specialty? Well, for us, more often than not, we contact artists because there's not really schools that train the people to illustration in Mauritius. So most of the people with who we are working are maybe street artists or painters at first, or they carry out other artistic activities, or they work in the media maybe. And we reach them. And I think that publishing should really be about a long-run point of view. We are called Atelier des Nomades, so Nomads Workshop. And for us, it's really about craftsmanship for and sort of artisanal way of doing. So we want to work with artists during a long time. We want to help them to become illustrators if that's needed, and it's not a problem for us. We want to work together with them on the long run. And we've actually worked along different artists to help them become illustrators, and we were always glad that we did so. I can give you an example of this. There was a woman that came to work with us. We helped us become an illustrator, and then she helped us and worked with us on 5 or 6 books. And then we sold the patents of the books to a publishing house in Ivory Coast. And then in Ivory Coast, she was asked to illustrate another book for them. So this work we carry out with the artists is not only to our own benefit, it will also help these people, and maybe it will kind of allow them to work in other contexts. Okay, brilliant. Thank you very much. So, Sandra, how does it work out in Mozambique? How do you choose illustrators, people who will draw for you? How do you choose them?
Okay, in my case, it's simpler because, as I said before, we publish in translation. So we often, when we negotiate the translation rights, we also buy the illustrations. And but when I'm selecting the projects, it's not just about a pretty illustration. I want a book that will be impactful in terms of representing children who have disabilities, children who have several skin tones, because we have to see that Mozambique is a rainbow nation. We have people who have blue eyes and blonde eyes, and we have several tones of black. So we try to be representative when selecting our projects. We don't have a large pool of illustrators, and I found this the hard way because I've been trying to promote authors, female authors in Mozambique, because as I said before, this is maybe I didn't go in deep why I decided not to pursue a career, but we have a very strong patriarchal society. That means that women are prevented from having many opportunities. There are very few of us who are architects, very few of us who have higher education, very few of us in any decision making or managing positions or in any profession that you can think of. So writing and illustration are not different. That's why we set up a workshop that is called As 7x4. So we pick 7 women that we are going to publish in all 4 Mozambican languages with more speakers. And we sit together with them and we develop the story. And then we also try to find an illustrator for the project. So that's when I realized that all the illustrations of books that were published in Mozambique looked the same. They had different illustrators, but the general language was the same. The characters seemed all the same. So I said, okay, so there is ground here for us to work. So we put together this small group. So it's now me and Liliana. She's with me at the Mozambican Publishers Association. And we conduct this call for illustrators because we had to rely on artists that have worked or have a portfolio already who would also illustrate some projects for children's books, or we would do some covers, but we don't have professional illustrators per se. So we use the social media, we use the online platforms that are known. I think we shouldn't mention any specific one. So that's where we try to find new talent, because that's the status in Mozambique. We have to build everything. And I think that's quite positive because we can try and shift this way of thinking that, oh no, as Africans, we have a certain language in illustration that is not comparable to illustrations that are done in the North. And this said by someone who went to Bologna and was mind blown by the illustrations that I saw there. So yes, this is the situation we are building up. We are trying to find these young girls. They are very talented. They are eager to learn, and we are trying to put together this environment, trying to create an ecology for publishing in which we have female authors, we have female illustrators that are extremely talented, extremely professional, and they produce a world-class product for us.
D'accord. Je vais vous poser une autre question.
Okay, thank you. I will ask you now another question. Another question that has to do with translating, because as you said, you are specialized in translation. So you said that 41 languages are spoken in Mozambique, and Portuguese is the dominating language, so to speak. And I want to know if illiteracy is important in your country or not. And also, how can you translate a language that rather oral into a written form? Will people read these books? What might hinder your work?
That's the million-dollar question, Veronique. As I told you, I've been in publishing for under 5 years, so I'm learning with every project. So yes, we speak 41 languages that are Bantu origin, and the official language is Portuguese, but Portuguese is only spoken by 11% of Mozambicans. So 11% of Mozambicans are able to communicate, to write, and to conduct their lives in the official language of the country. So there is a study that found that the language with most speakers is Makua, one of the languages that we publish, and the most speakers means 26%. So it's quite tricky then to find, as I told you, we are building the entire infrastructure. We are trying to create this book ecology. So we did a project recently with a book about a girl called Maria, and she's unapologetically Black. She's very strong about what she wants to be when she grows up. She doesn't conform with any gender role. She doesn't conform with any aesthetic or European standards of beauty. And she, in this book, she's talking about her brother, her older brother, because this book is by a Brazilian author, and he had a son. He wrote a book about the son. And then when the daughter was born, she asked, why don't I have a book about me? So in her book, she does the opposite of what the brother says. But the book is about rhyming. The book is about neologisms. And how can you translate the same rhyme, the same cadence of this poetic text into a Bantu language? Like you said, and you said well, Veronique, these are languages that are mostly oral. They are passed from mother to daughter, not in my case, unfortunately, because I'm a very particular generation in my country. So post-independence, the policy was to unite the country with the colonial language. So we would break down all tribal boundaries by speaking the colonial language. But it did damage, because now I don't speak mom's mother tongue, that's from the north of Mozambique, that's Kimwani, spoken by 3%. I don't speak dad's language, that's Xangana from the south, that's spoken by 11% of Mozambicans either, nor do my siblings or their children. So I want to reverse that by making these children's books in bilingual format. So we translate into Portuguese, and then we have the double text. So we have bilingual books So this enables us to, in a way, first create a written record of the language, and at the same time try to build a generation of children that will go back to the language of their grandparents and great-grandparents, and maybe improve the numbers of people who are literate in their mother tongues. So it's quite tricky. With the translators, we struggled because this group of men, they're all men. That's another issue. As I told you, illiteracy is a huge problem. We have a 39% illiteracy rate still. Yes, in 2023 we have 39% of Mozambicans who can't read, and 83% of those are women, because educating girls is not a priority. That's why I chose this Maria. She's Black, and she's telling, I'm not having any of these patriarchal ideas. I'm not perpetuating any gender roles that do not favor me. So I want this little girl from Nampula that speaks Makua, this little girl from Beira that speaks Sena, and this Xangana girl, that they can see this Maria and say, she looks like me. She has nappy hair like me. She's brown skinned, but here she is. She says, I can be whatever I want. And I think that I can now quote Mandela. He said that when you talk to a man in a language he understands, you get into their brain. But if you talk in their mother tongue, you get into their heart. So I want the heart of these little girls, plant the seed that they can become a Sandra. Unfortunately, I represent 1% of Mozambican women that can have a master's degree or choose their career path and be able to be in a forum like this. So that's why at Vintage Adnov, we also do audiobooks. I started them thinking about the blind, because my idea is to have books that are for everyone, but translating a novel into Braille, it's just too expensive. The volume is unmanageable in terms of portability. So, but the audiobook at the same time enables me to get to that woman that is rural, that is illiterate, because being illiterate doesn't mean that she doesn't want to read poetry. She doesn't want to read the latest novel or be able to understand what is written in the children's books that she just bought for her daughter. So this is, in a nutshell, what we are doing.
D'accord. Merci beaucoup.
Okay, amazing. Thank you very much. Zulfa, how's the situation in Indonesia regarding the different languages that exist and coexist in the country?
Okay, thank you, Veronique. In our alliance, one of the members is the founder of a publishing house called Lingkaran Tarnusa, and her name is Yulia. And Yulia is very passionate about preserving vernacular text. So not only that she is producing books that are bilingual, but she also put the vernacular characters in the book. And put the translation in the back. So 2 language with alphabet and with the original character, and then the translation. It's not always easy to read for the non-speakers or or those who use different language in Indonesia, because we also have around 300 languages exist, but many of them are expected to be extinct because of the diminishing number of the speakers, and the use of national language in everyday life, including in schools, and also the mixed ethnic marriage also makes the children difficult to learn the various local language they have. So I wish I have my friends with me here right now that can explain more about this, but we are working on that. And as for myself, I'm also thinking about the strategies, various strategies to preserve language. But so I studied in Japan a few years ago, and there is this picture book. So Japan looks like a homogeneous country, but actually they also have different dialects if they don't want to, if it's not a local language, it may be called a dialect. But dialect is also usually considered marginal, lower than the standard language. But this book that I read, they use this strategy, I think, a kind of compromising. So they use instead of using full local language, they mix the standard language with accents from the local language, so the readers still can capture few words and learn and try to guess what does it mean by the context of the illustration. So I think that can be also a strategy. So I don't think we need to use only one types of strategy to do this, like putting our full translation, but that is also very important. But we can explore on many other things that we can do to make children interested and try to use the language. Also, what my friend is doing is that local language is usually used for talking about things in the past, for example, folk tales. So what she is doing is that she is contemporizing the use of the local language by putting it into stories, like everyday stories. Maybe I'm thinking that local language should maybe also use for talking about scientific stuff. So like children may also use the language as a way to think critically, observation and critical thinking toward things. So these various aspects we can do, and yeah, we can. I think it is important to do all of that. Yeah, thank you.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, Corinne. In Mauritius, there are also many languages that coexist. And I would like to know how, as a publisher, you navigate among those languages. Well, I would like to come back to what Sandra was saying earlier. The language is a question. The linguistic question positions us as an island within an island. So it's the official language in Mauritius is English, but today Mauritius is one of the French-speaking countries where French is the most present and still progressing. So there's this kind of dichotomy here between the official language, that is language inherited by the last British colonizer, and then the use of people of French. And when you look at Mauritius authors, the ones that we hear the most are really authors who write in French. Natasha Pana, for example, and we have other authors here, but in many cases, the manuscripts that we received are written in French. And then there is the local language that is Creole, and that is spoken by the vast majority of the population, and it is a language that is being rehabilitated. I say rehabilitated because for a long time, and I'm part of this generation, for a very long time, we were taught that Creole was a language of slaves and therefore a language that you needed to hide, that you couldn't really put forward, and because it's not a language that would allow us to become international, to go abroad, to study, and so on. And so for many people, until maybe my generation, it's a language that was seen as a second category language, really. And so for a few years, we've been doing a rehabilitation work on the Creole, but it's very slow because having a dictionary, a specific grammar, but the fact that we forced people to interiorize such a narrative, it's not a reading language per se. So today you read Creole, but you read quick comments in the newspaper, you look at different images and caricatures, but you have a few novels, but it's not the majority of the production. And even though they are published, it's really hard to sell them. In our catalog, we have a few works in Creole or bilingual, but when we have them in Creole only, and then we have a French or an English version, well, the ones in Creole are the ones that are more difficult to sell, while it's the language that it's most commonly spoken. So that really shows the difficulty that we have today to rehabilitate this language. And as Zulfa and Sandra were saying, I think it's a fight that we need to do all the time, being aware of this predominance of some languages still today. Sandra was talking about 41 languages in her country. In Mauritius, we have less, we have around 5 or 6 that are commonly spoken, but we have around 7,000 languages around the world, and that should not be forgotten. And 2 years ago, I participated in a conference of Gisèle Sapiro, who studies questions of languages and translation. And I was not surprised, but really shocked to learn that only 85% of translated work today are books that are translated from English, actually. And so once again, well, as I was saying earlier, we consider that the US, that the UK are part of dominating countries in the publishing world. So obviously, we have the most work coming from those countries. But saying that 85% of translated work comes from English, it's crazy. It's really crazy when you think that we have 7,000 languages around the world. And there's a very important sentence of Alfred Daudet that is crucial in this. When a people falls in slavery, as long as they maintain their language, they have the key to their freedom. And I think it's a very strong sentence, because what we are left with at the end is our language, our mother tongue. Sandra was talking about the difficulty of literacy, and today we really know the link between mother tongue, local languages, and educational and literacy issues. And today, we still favor languages that families don't really speak at home. And that leads to these issues as well continuing to exist. So as publishers in the South, we have this responsibility, even though it's very complicated. and we know, we are aware that when we are going to edit a book in Creole, we're going to sell it less, but it's okay because we are going to talk about it, we are going to talk about the language itself, and so it's good. And last year we translated a book to show that we can translate from local languages to other languages and not be in these 85% all the time, even though we do it too, go from English to other languages, obviously. But last year we translated a book from Mauritius Creole to French with a topic that I'm very passionate about. It's the question of colonization, feminism, and so on. So it's a very important novel for us here. And for us, it was very important to go in that translation direction into French because we realized that some things cannot be translated in a language such as Creole, for example. The language uses more images than French, and so finding words that would give the same image was very difficult. And so this work of questioning the language, of wondering about the sounds of a word or the image of a word, what it means in comparison to another language, all of that is very important. And so the question of translation from which language to which language and in which direction, all of that are very important questions as well. In the global south, more importantly, in order to restore a form of balance, and that should be a more international concern as well. Okay, so that would mean that being a publisher in the south, you have to be committed and you have a form of a mission. Well, I don't know. I think so. I don't know if we are necessarily committed, but I think that we face less evidences, let's say. So we face more questions, so we ask more questions as well. And when we ask ourselves questions, we can say, okay, I'm just going to bury that over there. That's way too complicated. Or I can decide that I have a role to play, even if it's a very modest role, even if it's just a drop in the ocean, really. And maybe we have that choice. Maybe it's more visible when you are in the global south. And I think that in the global south, you might be less formatted than in the global north as well. So even though we face many challenges and difficulties, the advantage is that the pathways are more open, there are more pathways as well, and there are more possibilities. And so maybe those questions, those issues are presented to us, and then it's our choice to be committed or not. And I think that in the publishing world in which I evolve in Mauritius, some publishers are committed and others are not. And it's the same in France, for example. Some publishers are very committed and others are not. So I think it's also a decision that we can make to talk about these issues or not. We've decided to do so, but we know that we cannot talk about everything. We know that we have a very minor influence, but that allows us to really put forward those questions, to discuss them, to create links and relationships among people as well, because for example, through roundtables such as today, we realize that there are more of us that we could think, more of us to find those topics very important. Okay, thank you, Sandra. In your catalog, do you have specific questions on ecology and climate crisis, for example?
Yes, I do. But before I answer that, Veronique, I would like to make open just a parenthesis here. That we have scholars now in Mozambique that are involved in standardizing the orthographic part of the local languages. So this is a work in progress. So I think that the pool of translators that we have now into Bantu languages have the added challenge of not having all the tools. They don't have many dictionaries, they don't have grammars, they don't have many written corpus of in their specific target language, and this leads to the issue of untranslatability. So they think that most terms can be untranslatable, and I think that's particularly true when you're dealing with someone who's experimenting with words like Lázaro Ramos was doing in that particular project. And I also think that when we are talking about translating from Bantu languages into Portuguese or another colonial language, we have the challenge of thinking outside the box and trying to go beyond what are folk tales and try to do something that goes also beyond magic realism. We have to try to, like Zulfa said, show that we can also think and do science. We can do scholar papers in our Bantu languages. So that's, I had to say that before answering your question about ecology. So yes, there's this book that we have, and I'm really passionate about it. It's called The Plastic Fisherman. And it really resonates with the community I live in. I'm talking to you from Marraquém. It's 26 kilometers away from the capital city, but the reality is completely different. It's the banks of on the bank of the Comati River. So for you, it would be prime estate area, but for us, it's my neighbors are fishermen in huts. We have small farmers around here, and they even call my house the high rise, and it's just a two-story building, just to give you a context. So doing this project called the Plastic Fisherman, first, they know what they do every day to be able to provide for their families. But the thing is, with the climate changes, they struggle every day to bring home enough fish. We have laws in place to try to preserve some species. Unfortunately, in Mozambique, we don't have the capacity to oversee our 2,000 kilometers of coastline. So we have a lot of predatory fishing. So becoming the fisherman of plastic is a reality. It's not something that is dystopian or something that is in the far future. So this is a book about professions of the future. So sorry?
But what does it mean, actually? Sorry, what does it mean, plastic fisherman?
So instead concretely of throwing his net to catch fish, they are going to fish out all the plastic that we throw out in the oceans. So instead of bringing home fish to eat, they are going to clean up after the messes that we have been doing. So this is a book about all the future professions we'll have. We have the architect of impossible places. We have the creator of germs. So I like this project particularly in my community because I think that it will make these children think outside the box. So it's going to be about these professions. They don't even think right now. Nobody's thinking about being an astronaut. And this was a discussion that I had with a couple of intellectual women and feminists about the importance of having children from underprivileged backgrounds thinking about becoming an astronaut. Why not? So if we have a book that will make them not only preserve the environment, make them aware that if we catch a dugong, that we are taking out one of a few hundreds of them left. So it goes beyond the narrative. It goes beyond ecology per se. So it's about making an impact and creating citizens that are aware from a very young age, because I think that children are malleable. So if we can change all these predatory behaviors, and I call them predatory not in a bad way, because they need to do this to survive. Because if they don't fish the dugong, if they don't catch a dolphin or a shark or any other endangered species, they will not have anything to eat. So it's a work in progress, but I'm really excited about it. So this is the first one we have about ecology, but we are looking into an Indonesian project, actually Zulfa, that talks about saving water, that talks about segregating your trash. So yeah, I'm really excited about 2024 and the projects that we are going to do.
Merci beaucoup. Merci.
Véronique,
Oui.
Véronique,
Thank you very much. Thank you. Veronique, just wanted to say that you have about 15 minutes left, so if you want to maybe open the floor. Yeah, I will just ask a last question to Zulfa, and then we can open the floor. Yes, so I wanted to ask the same question to Zulfa, actually. How do you feel committed in your work in this struggle against climate change, but from your local perspective, from your work in the book, from the fact that you're a publisher?
Okay, thank you, Veronique. First, I want to tell Sandra that if you, just in case if you come to Indonesia, contact me so we can have a warm discussion, I think. So about that, yes, our other members of our alliance, we are very keen to discuss things about ecology, environmental problems, and its relation with human. And our member from Lingkaran Tanusa, they just published a book called Konferensi Musim Sejagat. It's an anthology of short stories for children. It's quite unique. It's unique because it's satire. So children are invited to talk, to imagine themselves as if they are not human, but other creatures in this fantastical world. But it resonates a lot with what's happening in Indonesia, the waste problem, the global warming, and also my publishing house, we also right now still working on our book called Makan Ini Makan Itu. It means this food, that food. The book, I wrote the book based on my past work on sociology of food. When I write my research about community and agriculture and food, I found that I read a lot about the work of Bruno Latour on actor network theory, and I think his work is really humbling for us human, especially because we need to take into account things that seems not important. Like human is always seen as the powerful ones that influence, but in fact we are also influenced by the non-humans, the environment, the trees, the mountains, the stones, even the bicycle and the car, the things that we made ourselves, we are also shaped by that. And that is what I try to portray in the book. I try to invite children to think about food not only as it's it's necessity to fit for your body, but also actually it tells about many things. It tells about your relation with your grandma, your relation with your neighbor, but also your relation with the trees and the river and things around you. And also it talks about history. It talks about the not so nice things in the past that are delicious in what you have today. So yeah, things like that. Thank you, Véronique.
D'accord. Merci. Merci
Okay,
beaucoup.
thank you. Thanks a lot. And I think that we now have questions from the floor. So I will leave it to Mariam and Laurence. Yes, I know that Anaïs is here with us today, a member of the Association for the Book Ecology, which is a French association. Anaïs, maybe you can shortly ask a question to our speakers. Anaïs Masola, what do you think? Do you want to react to what has been said? And do you want to say how you work? Yes, do you want me to introduce quickly the association and how it works? Yes, you can shortly introduce it if you want, so that everyone really gets it. So this is an interprofessional association, the Association for Book Ecology, that was created in 2009 with people that work in libraries, with researchers, with readers, and different type of stakeholders. This association is aimed at having a collective thought. In order to have a way of thinking in silos, we want to think together in an ecosystem of the book, and we want to promote indeed book ecology. So just a few words about the association. And now what's our vision? We've got a vision that is global, which is to say that we do not want to think about every problem separated from one another. We want to know how to spread our ideas. We want to question also the current way of selling books, of the whole value chain of a book. We want to think about the role of all the stakeholders and to have a critical approach with regards to these issues. And we want to try and imagine other ways that we might be working. The idea is, of course, always spreading ideas, spreading new voices. So we want to think about decolonialism, about also material issues. Where does the paper that the books are printed on come from, for example? And we've got to bear in mind that maybe 95, 99% of the narratives told today are maybe from the north more often than not. So that's some of the tasks that we try to work on. And so now to react to what you've said, I think that it was really interesting, this idea of putting forward new voices, new narrative, and new stories. This is fundamental. And we work on this too, but we've got to be clear, it's still very difficult to achieve what we want. In the association, for example, members of the association need to be very careful because we are, of course, a small publishing house working with small publishers, which are in opposition to bigger stakeholders in the market. And sometimes these small publishers do not think about the bigger picture, about a global point of view, so to speak. So yeah, I don't know if this is interesting and if it's an answer to what you've asked, and if this informs your debates, but I think that the way you told us about your world visions, about the way you were working, deeply echoes the way we try to work with our association. We try to foster thoughts. We try to make sure that people think again about the publishing world, and we want to question the centralization in the publishing industry. And we also want to make sure that people from small publishing houses really have a deep way of thinking, because we're not convinced that if they were to receive a big amount of money today, they would really change their way of thinking, so to speak. If their material conditions would evolve, would they really think differently? Also, and this is a general phenomenon that we can see, independent publishers have a particular sensitiveness with regards to the role they want to play in society, the way they want to build their life. And very often I hear that maybe we do too much, and that we're less good than big publishing house or industrial systems, because maybe big industrial companies might have access to recycled paper, and I think this is really not about this actually. If you add the production of the whole of independent publishers in the world of all they work on, it does not create an ecological problem. It's untrue. I saw some data, and I had estimated that overproduction was the biggest problem. At some point, we could think that the carbon consequences could be very hard if every independent publisher produced 43,000 books a year. And I don't think this is the case of many publishing houses in France. So you maybe, if you're independent, represent 3 to 4% of the whole publishing ecosystem. So I want to put these data forward just to see that you're not the responsible of contamination, actually. Of course, you're responsible for having an ecological approach, but we're not the people who are responsible of the disaster, to be honest. Thank you. Other questions, other reactions from the audience? You can raise your hand if you want to speak. You can take the floor.
Oui. Bon, je pense, oui, je pense on est arrivé à la fin, mais si
I
je peux,
think that we will soon be done, but I'd like to say that I really enjoyed this conversation with you. I learned a lot, and it's really fascinating to hear about your stories and to see the diversity of practices in your three countries, in your three regions, with these three brilliant women publishers. So really, I'm really happy to see what you do. And for example, if you think about Western Africa, you can really see this dynamic that's very similar to yours. People are looking for solutions. People are always wondering how to change. And I really liked also the fact that you recognize, you acknowledge that there are extraordinary opportunities, because of course there's still a lot to create and a lot of space for progress in your countries. So I'd like to thank you, Sandra. Thank you, Zulfa. Thank you, Corinne. And thank you also to the International Alliance of Independent Publishers for the session. Thank you very much. I'd like to make a quick announcement.